Hello, and welcome to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Cazoo, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters across the car retailing sector, from factory to forecourt.
Well, Philip's actually on holiday this week following the heatwave down to Somerset, although knowing him, he'll have his laptop open on the beach and will be keeping tabs on what's happening in the industry. But filling in for Philip, I'm delighted to welcome back my old friend Karl Davis, founder of Coachworks, industry consultant, business advisor and friend of the pod. So welcome back, Karl. How are you doing?
I'm doing grand, thank you, Curtis. What about yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed, and been looking forward to catching up with you because it's been a little while. Now you're recording in an air-conditioned meeting room in a dealership, and I'm recording in an unair-conditioned home office. So you're Mr. Cool today, aren't you?
Do you know what? It's a bit chilly in here. I might turn the heating up, actually. Yeah, I'm in a Jaguar Land Rover dealership, and they've very kindly afforded me an office so we could record this ahead of having a meeting. So yeah, I'm nice and chilled today.
Well, it's nice to hear you're nice and chilled on what looks as though it's going to be the hottest day of the year so far, although they've been coming thick and fast this week. And before we get into it, are you enjoying the World Cup?
Yes, I am. I'm not the world's biggest football fan, but you've got to turn the TV on when your home nation's playing, haven't you? So
Yeah.
I'll be glued to every England match.
Yeah, me too. I'm not a footy follower, but I do enjoy the internationals, especially when we're in it. So, but we will make sure we have plenty of hydration breaks. So we've got a few shout outs before we get on with the headlines. So first up is good luck to everyone shortlisted for a Motor Trader Independent Dealer Award. The awards night takes place next Tuesday, the 30th of June at the Belfry, and we'll bring you details of some of the winners next week. But in all, there's 28 categories ranging from used EV retailer and sales manager to car supermarket and small, medium and large independent dealers. So if you've been nominated and you're on the shortlist, good luck. Hope you have a good evening. And in this episode, after the midway break, we'll have this month's top tip from industry guru Ian Godbold. This is always a popular part of the pod, and with this month's top tip focused on ways to ensure every marketing pound is working as hard as possible, something I know that will resonate with you, Karl. You won't want to miss it.
Yeah, Ian is always worth a listen. He's probably the most energised person I know.
Yes, yeah. Well, Philip and I often feel our energy levels going up in the second half as we follow Ian. So hopefully that'll have a positive effect on us as well. But before we look at the headlines, this week's headlines, Karl, let's have a quick update from yourself, as you've been doing some interesting work around business planning and looking at the ability of senior leadership teams to communicate effectively across their organisations. What can you share with listeners?
Well, one point in particular. So these days, I only work at a leadership level. That's where I get the biggest kick. I think it's where I can offer the most value. And I've been doing this for 25 years, so I can be measured, but I can be brave too. I've been asked to speak recently, and I spoke at a forum which was East Midlands Economic Foundation. I was asked to speak as part of a panel on leadership. And the topic that I actually touched on was in the particularly dynamic space that we're in at the moment, where there seems to be no business as usual. The market in all sectors, not just automotive, changes so quickly.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for leaders to be clear on what their purpose is, what's their why, what is it they're trying to achieve, and make sure that everybody in the organisation understands that and that they have a plan to actually achieve their purpose, their why. And I'll give you an example of the way I go about this. When I'm called into a business, I'll meet with the board and I'll listen intently. And then if I'm not sure of what their why is, I'll pass each of the board members 3 post-it notes. I'll say just write down what your top three priorities are, one on each post-it note. And when those post-it notes come back across the table, what do you think I see?
Probably not the same messages from each and every one of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Inconsistency. So if the board don't know what it is they're trying to achieve, the organisation is going to struggle. And then the next point is, if they get the clarity of purpose, has the senior leadership team written a plan that's actually going to get them to where they need to get to? And then finally, can anybody within that senior leadership team stand on a box and communicate it consistently and succinctly to the whole team so they understand what it is they're trying to do and how they're going to get there? And I hope the listeners don't feel patronised by the point that I'm making, because there's many organisations that do this brilliantly. But I would actually just challenge listeners of the pod to actually just go and test that in their own organisation. Is there clarity of purpose? And is there a plan? And is it being communicated consistently?
Well, Karl, our listeners are pretty smart, so I'm rather hoping that they're sort of nodding sagely as you say that.
I would agree. There's a difference between knowing and doing, though, so I would
Yes.
still urge them go and pressure test that.
Definitely. And Karl, before we look at this week's headlines, one of the big motoring related stories that broke last week was Jeremy Clarkson's diagnosis of prostate cancer. Now, for anyone who has watched the current series of Clarkson's Farm, the announcement came as a shock, really. But judging by an interview that he gave to the Times only this week, he's not only in remission, but also filming season 6. But as someone who has also had prostate cancer, this story resonated with you, didn't it?
It did. I've been a lifelong fan of the Sunday Times, and I'm intrigued by Clarkson. He makes me smile. And the article that he wrote was fantastic. I think it was in his regular Sunday piece. What was interesting was Jeremy Clarkson had no symptoms. He had no symptoms, and it was just a chance blood test that showed a heightened PSA score, prostate-specific antigen. And like me, he had an aggressive strain of prostate cancer, but like me, he had time to get it addressed. Yeah. So brilliantly written, typically Jeremy Clarkson making fun out of a pretty somber point, but the key message is his profile. If he can do for prostate cancer what he's done for farming, if he can do 10% of what he's done for farming, that article and his profile is going to save some lives. So well done, Jezza.
Yep, definitely.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Cazoo.
So headlines this week come from AM, Motor Trade News, Motor Trader and Car Dealer. So that's all the main B2B dealer titles, as well as The Guardian and This Is Money. For the first half of this week's pod, we'll look at a newly published market check report showing how used EV sales have surged to record levels in the UK following the war between the USA and Iran, which triggered those spiralling costs of petrol and diesel at the pumps, and how EVs are the fastest selling used cars in June in the UK and across Europe, as reported by Indicator. Then, in the second half, we've got some dealer full-year financial results from two major AM100 players, Perrys and Caffyns, and we'll finish off with some OEM UK manufacturing news from Nissan and Jaguar Land Rover.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Cazoo.
So the first story this week comes from, it's actually a press release that was put out by Market Check during the week. And the headline is Used EV sales surged to record levels following late February Iran war commencement. So this is gradually being picked up by some of the trade titles, but I thought for sort of a more detailed look, we'll site will go to the press release, and there will be a link to the press release in the newsletter that goes out Monday morning. But this is Market Check, who put together used car market data analysis, and it published figures showing a dramatic increase in used EV sales following the escalation of the war in the Middle East from the end of February. And its data shows that during the first 5 months of 2026, a total of 143,000 used EVs were sold across the UK, compared to just 93,000 during the same period in 2025. And the strongest growth occurred immediately after the end of February, while used EV sales were already ahead of 2025 levels in January and February. Volumes accelerated sharply during that March and April period. And within the release, it goes on to say that March saw 32,880 used EVs sold, compared to 20,880 in March 2025. April followed with a new monthly record of 34,930 sales, almost double the 18,000 recorded in April 2025. And the figures suggest that concerns around fuel prices and wider energy market uncertainty may have accelerated interest in EVs during the spring. And anecdotally, we were hearing this a lot as it was happening, in that time from February to now. What did you make of this, Karl?
I was impressed by the figures that you've stated, and I think it sort of likened itself to the situation where energy raised by about 300% at the start of the Ukraine conflict, and immediately businesses went out wholesale putting solar panels on top of their buildings. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the oil price. People are thinking, right, we've got to do something about this. And I think manufacturers could still do more to actually highlight how cheap it is, pence per mile, with electric, particularly if you can home charge, and particularly if you've got a dual tariff where you get cheaper electricity in the evening. So I think it's a number of things. The figures are the figures; they don't lie. It's a moment in time that's spiking action, and also, Curtis, it's supported by the fact that the EV charging infrastructure is getting better. More and more manufacturers are giving extensive warranties on the batteries. Suzuki, for example, their newly released e-Vitara, 10-year service activated warranty, including the battery. So there's less friction. There's less things to be scared of. So I think it's happening, and it's going to power ahead this year, I think.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. And I mean, this is welcome news for the sector, because used EVs have been a slow burn, but what we're seeing now is sort of genuine interest, and customers actually looking at EV alternatives to ICE vehicles without the sort of push that we've seen from the government with the ZEV mandate. This is more organic demand. So remains to be seen what happens now. We've got the 60-day truce in place, so whether or not that will calm down that demand for used EVs remains to be seen. But definitely an interesting trend to keep tabs on. And following on from that, and sort of closely related, heading over to AM Online, the headline is June's top 3 fastest selling used cars, all EVs, data shows. So this is the latest research from Indicator, which we do visit on a regular basis on the podcast. And it shows the top 3 fastest selling used cars in June were all EVs. And it actually breaks down that the fastest selling was the Tesla Model 3, which sold in 14.1 market days. So market days is the way Indicator references its days to sell. And that was closely followed by the Volkswagen ID.5 at 16.5 days and the Cupra Born at just 18.1 days. So some pretty fast-selling EVs there, Carl.
Yeah, and despite Elon Musk's best efforts to kill the Tesla brand, he didn't actually achieve it, did he?
No. Give him time, though.
Yeah, so I have seen one or two stickers on Teslas saying, I bought my Tesla before Elon Musk went nuts. But, Tesla's a great brand, and it doesn't surprise me that the ID.5 was in the top three either. Don't know so much about the Cupra Born as a product, but I know Cupra is a dynamic brand. So yeah, good info, one to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And within the data, Indicator attributed the strong performance of EVs to unprecedented demand caused by conflict in the Middle East, raising fuel prices, which is exactly what we discussed in that opening story. So you can see these two stories coming together. And it also went on to say that EVs accounted for just over 10% of used car sales in June, while the fuel types figures of 35 days under those market days supply metrics. So typically averaging 35 days to sell for used EVs. And what we'll do is put the Indicator report, which is definitely worth looking at it every month. We'll put a link to that in the newsletter that goes out Monday morning. So do check that out. But we'll be back with the rest of the week's headlines after this.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Cazoo. Next up is car retailing industry guru Ian Godbold, sharing his top tips on how to steer your business to success.
Well, here we are, and what a glorious week. The sun is shining, the World Cup is adding to the feel-good factor, and with Q2 drawing to a close, 2026 is shaping up to be another strong year for many dealer groups, building on the momentum we've seen throughout H1. Strong markets are obviously good news, but they can also mask inefficiencies, particularly when dealers are selling high volumes of new vehicles. Now is the time to take a hard look at marketing costs and lead generation performance. Over the past few months, we've seen annual marketplace price increases come into effect, PPC costs continue to rise across the sector, additional paid-for enhancements and add-ons quietly increasing monthly spend, and significant differences in lead costs between dealers purchasing exactly the same products. The reality is that profitability isn't just driven by selling more vehicles. It's about ensuring every marketing pound is working as hard as possible. Working with dealer groups, independent retailers and technology partners across the UK and Europe gives us a valuable perspective on what good looks like when it comes to channel performance, lead costs and supplier pricing. One area of growing concern is the focus on average cost per lead figures quoted by marketplaces. Most dealers reading this won't consider themselves average, and nor should they. The objective is to maximise return on advertising spend and benchmark performance against the best, not the average. Now is the ideal time to review the following: marketplace spend, PPC performance and costs, lead costs by channel, technology and supplier costs, and areas where savings and efficiencies may be available. In a buoyant market, reviewing costs often slips down the priority list. That can be an expensive mistake. Act now to ensure you're in the strongest possible position for Q3. If you want to know more, get in touch with me at Ian Godbold at igcdigital.co.uk or drop me a line on LinkedIn. So have a strong finish to Q2, enjoy the sunshine and come on England!
Yeah, come on, England, indeed. Many thanks, Ian, for that. And the key messaging there, Carly, is really ensuring that every marketing pound is working as hard as possible, which is what Ian said. Did this resonate with you? I mean, you've spent many years in consultancy.
Well, two observations. The first one is a personal one because he's such a character. I'd advise Ian to stay away from Pro Plus tablets or even Lucozade because he's in danger of exploding if he has any sort of additional additives in his body. That man is so energized;
Yeah.
he just lifts me every time I listen to him. I think the thing that really I take out of that is just the cost of the lead in the first place and what we do with it. And everybody's got an example of making an inquiry and it not being followed up. And one thing I did when I ran dealerships, and I've advised lots of businesses to do it, to put an extra focus on those paid for leads that are being generated through your own efforts or through your manufacturer brand partner, is incentivize colleagues that are on the front line selling to actually really get hold of those inquiries and maybe pay an extra percentage of commission on top for converting a paid for lead rather than organically generated walk-in type lead. They're valuable. We can't waste a single opportunity. But equally, Curtis, I can't go to the pub without somebody bending my ear about a bad car buying experience.
Yes.
And we are, we're our own worst enemy sometimes as an industry.
Yeah, most definitely. And if, as Ian says, you've really got to look at these opportunities. You've got to maximise them. It's your money that's going out, so make sure it's working hard for you. And Ian, you can direct message him on LinkedIn. If you don't already follow him, then do follow him because he does post some great content, some great data and thoughts over the course of any given week. Or you can email him at iangodbold@igcdigital.co.uk. So moving on, so the next two stories are really looking at dealer financials. So we're starting to see a lot of the full year results from last year, and these financials are with two big high-profile groups, starting with Perrys. So the headline at Motor Trade News is Perrys Group profits up in 2025, driven by after-sales strength. And it's worth just reflecting a bit on Perrys because they are a major player. They're ranked 25 in the AM100, based in the East Midlands, and it can trace its roots back to 1908 when it's selling accessories for those newfangled motor cars. It's got 51 branches representing, among others, Ford, Citroen, Kia, Mazda, and MG, as well as, and this is quite crucial for this particular story, it's quite key, as well as newcomers Jayco, Omoda, Geely, BYD, and Leap Motor. So results for the 12 months to the end of December 2025. So it's a financial year, but it's also a calendar year. Gross profits were up to £94 million in 2025, and that was up from 93.3 million in the previous year, and that was due to strong after-sales performance, which we'll look at in a minute, as well as the expansion of its Chinese brand partnerships. So revenues were up by 2.6% to 788.5 million, and restructuring and site closure costs, exceptional costs of about £500,000, was very similar to the figure in 2024. And just looking at new vehicle trading, Perry said that new vehicle trading conditions were challenging in 2025 with uneven customer demand, reduced manufacturer support, and the volatility of fleet and Motability channels. And the group said retail volumes were strong and outperformed the wider market in 2025. But it saw a year-on-year decline in both those fleet and Motability volumes. Now, and just finishing off on vehicle sales, margins on each used vehicle improved, although used vehicle revenues were down 1.3%. But I think what particularly interested you, Carl, in this particular story, this set of results was after sales, because that proved to be a significant contributor to the overall performance.
Yeah, turnover up 3.6%, £14.3 million direct profit from after sales. That can't be sniffed at. And I'm sure if I spoke to Darren or a senior team member there, they would be telling me that they're serious about data capture. They will have a data manager in a seriously high role, probably on the board, and they've got a tailored plan. They must be doing the basics brilliantly
Yeah.
to be getting a performance like that. And fair play to them, absolute respect. If you've got a great after sales business, that's a great start point to sell your next car, isn't it?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, outstanding after sales performance there. And certainly as a group, they attributed their growth to after sales, but also, they do call out the positive impact that adding BYD, Amoda, Jayco, Geely over the course of last year actually helped overall performance. So Darren Ardern, who you mentioned there, MD of Perrys Group, he says the year saw us revisit our franchise portfolio and extend our partnerships with several Chinese brands, as well as multi-franchising existing sites, also adding in additional authorised repairer points. And he goes on to say, we also took this strategic decision to exit certain locations as part of a larger strategic plan. So, yeah, very much a group constantly reviewing the portfolio, constantly reviewing each and every dealership, and ensuring that they are maximising on all their opportunities.
Totally agree, Curtis. And what impressed me about Perry's is they've learnt to pivot, haven't they? Sometimes you have to change direction, and as the game changes, they've changed their plan. So, wishing them more success.
And heading over to Motor Trader for the next story, the headline is Caffyns turns in £1.7 million loss as new car sales come under pressure. So again, a bit of background on Caffyns. They're ranked 69 in the AM 100 based in East Sussex, and they actually trace their roots back even further to 1903. And one of the few remaining listed car retailers alongside the likes of Virtue and Motorpoint. It operates 20 dealerships across Sussex and Kent, representing 9 brands, and particularly strong in the Volkswagen Group franchises. So Caffyns, in the report in Motor Trader, experienced significant trading headwinds in the year to the end of March 2026, delivering a pre-tax loss of £1.7 million. And that compared to a £246,000 profit the prior year on turnover that was down 2% to £270.7 million. Now, looking at new car sales, as we did with the Perry stories, new car unit deliveries fell by 11%, as many of the brands it represents came under pressure from new Chinese entrants, which we're starting to see a lot in the full year results we're talking about on the podcast. Now, Caffyns already has Chinese representation with MG and is in talks that could lead to taking on others. And just looking at used car sales rose by 4%, boosted by Seat and Cupra expansion, but margins came under pressure because they were actually down 5%. And Caffyns said shrinking new car sales in post-COVID years meant the used car park was smaller and competition intense to source cars at the right price, which again is something we hear a lot about on the podcast. What did you make of this one, Carl?
I agree with that point. Sourcing good quality stock is a challenge, but it's a challenge for every retailer. And if you've got the brands where maybe the new car sales have slipped back, that's naturally going to cause a problem. But for me, it's the guerrilla tactics that need to be employed. And I'll give you a simple example, Curtis. in the Davis household, we've got a fleet of 5 cars and 2 motorcycles. Out of those 7 vehicles, one of the sellers of those vehicles has come back to us over a period of time and said, would you like to sell your car back to us? The other 6 haven't. So you've got a database, even if your sales this year or last year are smaller than the preceding year, you've still got a big database, and there's an opportunity to be buying stock from your customers as well as selling them stock. And if I go back to the days when I was retailing, my salespeople were incentivized to put their business cards under a windscreen wiper saying, I would really like to buy your car. Please give me a call. And do you know what? We got some calls, and that salesperson got more commission because he had generated that item of stock. And okay, it's 30 years on, but the principle's the same. So we've got to use social media effectively to actually say, this is a great place to actually buy a car, and it's the best place to sell your car back to us.
Yeah.
Really.
Yes, totally agree there, Karl. And it's one of those processes, and I guess it goes back to what Ian was saying. It's one of those processes that we all know. Yeah, a car comes in for a service. Why not give that customer a quote for the value of that car as a potential part exchange on an offer of a new car? But it doesn't happen as consistently as it should, across our industry, does it?
No, I'm pleased to say I could name names now of organisations that do have a culture of making sure that a salesperson looks at that list of bookings for that day. They highlight the cars that have probably been owned long enough that the owner might consider swapping that car, and they proactively have conversations, and not hypothetical ones, specific ones about, we would like to give you this amount of money for your car against this latest model. It's the difference again. It's the difference between knowing and doing. And listeners will be shaking their head at this point saying, we do all of this. Well, you're only doing it if you're checking it constantly, because people fail to respect what we fail to inspect. So it's an oldie, but it's a goodie.
And finishing off this week's pod, we've got 2 OEM-related stories. But before we go into them, just prior to hitting the record button for today's pod, the SMMT announced that UK vehicle production in May rose by 2.7%, driven by car production, which was actually up 3.2%. Following 4 months of decline. So that's really good positive news. And that's mostly on the back of increased export orders, while van production, which we know has been hit hard, was down again. It was actually down 7.6% for the month. And overall production for the year to date is down 8.7%. And that leads us in neatly to the next 2 stories. So the first one is from The Guardian, and the headline there is, Nissan shelves all-electric Qashqai plans as it cuts costs. So this is Nissan reportedly stopping the development of a fully electric version of its Qashqai, which is its top-selling model across Europe, as the car maker seeks to cut a fifth of its models and slash costs. Now, Nissan is reportedly, within this story, is reported to have quietly halted development of a full EV version of the Qashqai at Sunderland, which is the site of the UK's largest car factory. And that actually happened last year. And that was reported by Reuters. So The Guardian have picked up on this report from Reuters and added to it and really given it a sort of local UK flavour. So Nissan is now in talks with the government about securing financial support to plan the future of the plant. But with all the turmoil that's happened this week within government, that's probably a conversation that's going to be put on hold for a little while. And also worth mentioning that we reported just, I think, last month that Nissan is in advanced talks with Chery to manufacture vehicles in Sunderland, so possibly opening the doors to local production for Jaco, Omoda and Chery, because clearly, the plant there is underutilized, so it does make sense to introduce some contract manufacturing. But this is unwelcome news, isn't it? Because the Qashqai EV potentially was going to be an important model for the brand and for Sunderland.
The Qashqai is a fantastic car, Curtis. I don't know whether you've touched, felt, or driven one recently. I have. I was really impressed. When I looked at this article, I had to Google how long that factory's been in place because I remembered it opening. It's 37 years ago that Nissan invested in the Northeast. And if they need to collaborate to keep that factory and that skilled workforce in place, fair play to them. Collaboration is a it's a superpower. If they have to collaborate and they do it positively, why not? The article did say that 7 factories have been closed globally with the loss of 20,000 jobs. We don't want to see our manufacturing base in the UK disappear. So fair play to them, respect.
Yeah, exactly, because Sunderland, there's 6,000 workers, they're major employer. And the piece, just to finish off, it does intimate that if Nissan was to change its mind and restart the Qashqai EV project, it would not come to market until the early 2030s. So it's going to be late for the party because that model would have been superseded by other models and lost out to some of the competitive Chinese models coming in.
Do you know what, Curtis? I think increasingly so. The likelihood of a softening of ZEV mandate will be affecting some strategic decisions as well.
Yes.
Why go full bore head on down an entirely BEV approach when maybe the targets are going to soften? I think they will.
Yeah, so maybe that's a case of just hedging their bets on that one, because there's certainly been a lot of talk over recent weeks about that watering down. But again, with what's happening with the leadership, I was going to say contest, but potential coronation. Again, that's a decision that's going to be kicked down the road a little, I suspect.
Yeah, there's some real speculation about what's around the corner if Andy Burnham sits in number 10. Time will tell, but it's I think we'll all be holding on to our hats, Curtis. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So, Karl, do you fancy a nice upbeat story to finish the podcast on?
Only if it's close to where I grew up.
Okay, I've got just the story for you, and this is from This Is Money, and the headline is "Boost for Britain as JLR announces plans to build new Defender at Merseyside plant." Is that local enough for you? Yep.
Get in there. Some would say I'm a plastic scouser because I grew up in Chester, about 12 miles away from Halewood. So I'm delighted by that, and particularly so given that I've had 3 Land Rover 90s over the last few years. So come on.
Well,
that's what
yeah, I know that you're a big fan of the Defender, so I knew that this story was going to resonate with you. So this is what surprises me about this story is that it didn't seem to be widely picked up. So as I say, this is from This Is Money, and the report shows that the new Defender model is likely to be built at the Merseyside plant in what it describes as a much needed boost to the British car industry, certainly following the last story there about Nissan. And Land Rover moved production, and it was very controversial at the time. It moved production of its popular Defender range to Slovakia in 2019, and the model was previously built for decades upon decades at JLR's Solihull factory near Birmingham. So this is all about the new electric Defender variant being manufactured at the Halewood plants, which has been in operation since 1962 and employs 3,000 staff. No production start date has been announced, but this is really welcome news, isn't it, Karl?
It is, and that site has history because, of course, in the 60s it was manufacturing Fords, and it was only when Ford owned Jaguar Land Rover that that started to manufacture JLR products. It's big news, and it's actually almost surprises me because the cost of production in the UK, one of the biggest factors is the cost of energy, and our energy is the most expensive in Europe, and that's not an attractive proposition to actually manufacture anything. So that's a real leap of faith, and I would say it's probably a good example of the government actually supporting that investment with some sort of grant or aid of some type. We need our manufacturing heartland. It's disappearing fast. This is a good news story. I'm going to say it again. Get in there. Great stuff.
Well, Karl, lots of headlines covered this week, ranging from current trends in the used EV market, the latest financial year ends from some big name dealer groups, and updates on OEM manufacturing activity in the UK. So everything from forecourt to factory, as we like to say here on the pod. We'll have full details and links to each story in our newsletter, which is distributed Monday morning on LinkedIn. If you don't already subscribe, then just search for Motor Trade Radio Podcast on LinkedIn, follow us and sign up for that free newsletter. But Karl, look, many thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed sitting in for Philip. And have you thawed out yet?
I'm temperate now. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's hard to try and even attempt to fill his boots, but it's been a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks very much.
No, many thanks for joining us. Philip and I are back on Tuesday for our review of June's trade values with Brago's Rupert Pontin. But until then, many thanks for listening to this Motor Trade Radio podcast. Thanks once again to Karl for joining us and co-hosting. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from Karl Davis, your critical friend.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Cazoo.